You know that moment when the universe decides it hasn't messed with you enough? Yeah, well, turns out the universe is a distant cousin of my husband, Henry. The silence in our suburban kitchen, usually punctuated by the hum of the fridge or the distant wail of a neighbor's dog, was suddenly deafening. It was a Tuesday, which for the record is statistically the most boring day of the week. Yet somehow, it managed to deliver the kind of plot twist usually reserved for a Netflix documentary about cults. I was standing there, mid-sip of my lukewarm coffee. Because who has time for hot coffee when you're perpetually running on fumes and the faint hope of a quiet moment? When my eyes landed on the kitchen counter, specifically on a small, unassuming envelope. It wasn't a bill, thank God, nor was it a flyer for another one of Henry's cousin's pyramid schemes. No. This was far more insidious. This was a pair of Super Bowl LIX tickets, premium seats, Section 105, Row 3, the kind of seats that cost more than my first car, my last vacation, and probably Henry's entire sense of self-awareness combined. My heart did a little flutter kick, the kind you get when you realize you've forgotten to pay a bill, but then you remember it's not due for another week. A fleeting moment of relief, followed by the inevitable crash. Because, as delightful as the thought of attending the Super Bowl with my husband, Henry, was, a man whose primary contribution to any sporting event was complaining about the price of beer and asking if the halftime show was over yet. Something felt off, like a perfectly baked cake with a lingering whiff of burnt plastic. Henry wasn't a planner. He was more of a, let's wing it and see what happens, probably disastrously kind of guy. So, these tickets, pristine and radiating an aura of expensive anticipation, were a red flag waving in a hurricane. I picked them up, my fingers tracing the holographic security features. They felt real, too real. And then, my gaze drifted to the name printed on the second ticket. Not Natalie, not wife, not even poor soul dragged along. No, it was Lily. Lily. The name hung in the air, thick and cloying, like cheap perfume in a crowded elevator. Lily, Henry's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he still followed on Instagram, whose posts he occasionally liked at 3 a.m., claiming it was muscle memory or a glitch in the Matrix. The one he'd sworn, hand on heart, or at least vaguely in the direction of his chest, was ancient history, a relic from a time when he still thought frosted tips were a good idea. Apparently, I wasn't just invisible, I was also transparent, and possibly, in his grand scheme of things, interchangeable with a woman he hadn't seen in person in over a decade. I stood there, the coffee growing colder, the Super Bowl tickets feeling heavier than a mortgage payment. My first instinct wasn't to scream or cry or even throw the coffee mug at the wall. Though, let's be honest, the thought did cross my mind briefly, like a fleeting, violent whisper. No, my first instinct was to laugh. A low, humorless chuckle that started in my gut and worked its way up, tasting faintly of betrayal and stale coffee. Because really? The Super Bowl? Not a quiet dinner, not a clandestine weekend getaway, but the biggest sporting event in America, with millions of eyes, both live and televised on it? The sheer audacity was almost commendable. Almost. Oh, Henry, I murmured to the empty kitchen, you've really outdone yourself this time. I thought the time you tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner in the microwave was the peak of your domestic incompetence. I stand corrected. The absurdity of it all was truly magnificent. It wasn't just that he was cheating. It was that he was doing it with the theatrical flair of a B-movie villain, complete with front-row seats to the spectacle. It was like he'd planned a grand reveal, only he forgot to invite the main character, me, to the dress rehearsal. Or even to the show itself. Unless I was supposed to be the popcorn vendor. My mind, which usually operates on a what's for dinner and did I remember to lock the door? Frequency suddenly shifted into overdrive. It wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about the sheer disrespect, the casual disregard for my existence. It was as if I were a piece of furniture, easily moved, easily replaced. A beige sofa that had served its purpose and was now being swapped out for a slightly shinier, less used model. And the Super Bowl, of all places, the pinnacle of American excess and spectacle. He was planning to parade his past, his what if, on a stage that screamed, "Look at me." A wave of something akin to morbid fascination washed over me. How long had this been going on? Was Lily aware of me? Did she care? Probably not. People rarely do when they're busy reliving their glory days, especially when those glory days involve a man who still thinks he's in his 20s. I pictured them there, in those premium seats, sipping overpriced beer, maybe even holding hands. The thought didn't sting as much as it should have. It was more like watching a particularly bad reality TV show, where the characters are so devoid of self-awareness that you can't help but be entertained by their train wreck. "Well, isn't this just delightful?" I said, my voice dripping with an irony so thick you could spread it on toast. Apparently, I wasn't just invisible. I was also transparent enough for Henry to see right through me and straight to his past. Who knew my superpower was being a human window? The initial shock gave way to a cold, calculating calm. The kind of calm that precedes a storm. Or perhaps, in my case, a perfectly executed, subtly devastating act of domestic terrorism. Henry thought he was going to the Super Bowl with Lily. Oh, he was going to the Super Bowl, all right. Just not in the way he imagined. And definitely not with the company he expected. The game was on. And I, for one, was ready to play. The days that followed were a masterclass in passive-aggressive performance art. Henry, bless his oblivious heart, was practically humming with pre-Super Bowl excitement. He'd walk around the house, checking his fantasy league stats, muttering about defensive strategies, and occasionally asking me if I thought his lucky jersey still fit. I'd just nod, offering a saccharine smile that could curdle milk. "Oh, absolutely, honey. It fits you like a glove that's about to get very, very dirty." He, of course, heard none of the subtext. He rarely did. His hearing was selective, much like his memory of our wedding vows. The microaggressions, which had been a low hum in our marriage, suddenly cranked up to a full-blown symphony. Henry would leave his socks on the floor, knowing full well I'd trip over them. He'd forget to take out the trash, leaving a festering monument to his domestic neglect. He'd even started leaving his empty cereal bowls on the counter, as if I were his personal house elf. Each small act was a tiny pinprick, a reminder of how little he valued my presence, how much he took me for granted. And each pinprick fueled the fire of my burgeoning plan. "My mother always said family was everything," I mused aloud one evening, as Henry scrolled through his phone, ignoring me. Pity she thought I was nothing when it came to her son's happiness. Or perhaps she just meant his family, not the one he built with me. It's a subtle distinction, but apparently one that matters. Henry just grunted, probably agreeing with his mother. The man was a walking, talking embodiment of arrested development, perpetually stuck in a state of prefrontal cortex immaturity. The gaslighting. It was an Olympic sport in our household, and Henry was a gold medalist. When I'd casually mention the Super Bowl tickets, "Oh, honey, I saw those tickets on the counter. Are they for your cousin Bob? He's such a huge fan." Henry would develop a sudden convenient case of amnesia. "Tickets? What tickets, sweetie? You must be imagining things. Maybe you need more sleep." He'd say it with such earnest concern, such a practiced furrow of his brow, that for a split second, I'd almost believe him. Almost. I was made a fool of, I thought, watching him meticulously clean his favorite team's cap. And here I thought the family clown was my uncle, Gerald, who still wears Crocs to weddings. Turns out, it was me, playing the role of the devoted wife while my husband was busy auditioning for a role in How to Lose a Wife in 10 Days Super Bowl edition. The abandonment wasn't just emotional, it was literal. Henry was spending more and more time working late, or at the gym, though I suspected the gym was a euphemism for plotting his Super Bowl tryst with Lily. I'd come home to an empty house, the silence echoing my growing detachment. It was almost liberating, in a twisted way. It gave me ample time to plot, to scheme, to meticulously plan the downfall of a man who thought he was untouchable because he owned a season ticket to mediocrity. My social circle, bless their hearts, were no help. My best friend Sarah would say, "Oh, Natalie, you're overthinking it. Maybe it's just a work thing." My sister, bless her even more, would offer, Well, you know Henry. He's a bit clueless. He probably didn't mean anything by it. Nobody defended me. Nobody saw the slow, insidious erosion of my marriage. They saw Henry as the lovable, slightly goofy husband, and me as the perpetually stressed wife. It was a running gag, a punchline I was tired of delivering. My husband's so thoughtful, he planned a romantic getaway for himself and his ex. And my family? They just thought it was Henry being Henry. Apparently, Henry being Henry is a synonym for Henry being a colossal jerk. I started seeing Henry through a new lens, one coated in a thick layer of cynical amusement. Every time he'd complain about the traffic, I'd think, "Just wait, honey. You're about to hit a real traffic jam of consequences." Every time he'd boast about his connections at work, I'd picture him trying to use those connections to get out of the mess he was about to create. He was a caricature, a walking billboard for male entitlement, and I, his long-suffering wife, was about to pull the plug on his little show. The Super Bowl tickets sat in a drawer in my nightstand, a constant, tangible reminder of his betrayal. I'd look at them sometimes, picturing Lily's face, probably all dewy-eyed and nostalgic, as she sat next to Henry, basking in the glow of his pathetic attention. The thought didn't make me angry anymore. It made me determined to turn their little romantic comedy into a slapstick tragedy. I started doing my research, not just on Super Bowl seating charts, though that was crucial, but on Henry's habits, his vulnerabilities, his deepest, darkest fears. Turns out, his deepest fear wasn't losing me, or even losing his job. It was public humiliation, the thought of being seen as anything less than the successful, put-together man he pretended to be. And that, my friends, was a goldmine. The more I observed him, the more pathetic he seemed. He was like a child playing dress-up, convinced he was a grown-up. And I, the adult in the room, was about to take away his toys and replace them with a very uncomfortable, very public, very smelly surprise. The Super Bowl wasn't just a game anymore. It was a stage. And I was about to steal the spotlight. From Henry, and from Lily, and from anyone else who thought I was just a background character in my own life. My suffering, you ask? Oh, I ironized it. I turned it into a stand-up routine I performed for myself in the shower. You know you've hit rock bottom when your husband plans a romantic date with his ex at the Super Bowl. I'd quip, scrubbing my hair with a vengeance. And here I thought my biggest problem was finding matching socks. Turns out, it was finding a husband who wasn't a walking, talking cliché. My plan wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative, turning the pathetic into the poetic, the tragic into the comedic. The first step was acquiring the tickets. Not the fake ones, mind you, but the real ones. The ones Henry had so carelessly left on the counter. I'd carefully, meticulously, almost reverently removed them from their envelope. They were beautiful, really. Little rectangles of pure, unadulterated hubris. My plan was so discreet, so elegantly simple, that even the CIA would take notes. Between coffees, of course. I took high-resolution photos of them, front and back, noting every single detail. The barcodes, the seat numbers, the tiny, almost invisible security features. I was becoming a forensic expert in Super Bowl ticket forgery, a skill I never thought I'd need, but one that, frankly, was far more useful than anything I learned in college. Then came the swap. This was the delicate part, the surgical precision required to avoid detection. Henry, bless his heart, was predictable. He always kept important documents in his man drawer, a chaotic abyss of old receipts, tangled charging cables, and questionable snacks. One evening, while he was engrossed in a particularly thrilling episode of Extreme Hoarders, I slipped into his office. My heart wasn't pounding with fear, but with a giddy anticipation, like a child on Christmas Eve, except instead of presents, I was delivering a very special kind of coal. I found the original tickets, tucked neatly into a folder labeled Important Stuff, because subtlety was not Henry's strong suit. With a practiced hand, I replaced them with my expertly crafted fakes. These weren't just photocopies. Oh no, these were works of art. I'd spent hours online, researching paper types, ink densities, and the precise shade of corporate blue used by the NFL. The fakes looked identical to the originals, down to the slightly frayed edge where Henry had probably fiddled with them. The only difference? The barcodes, and the seat numbers, and the section, and, well, everything that mattered. The new tickets, the ones Henry would actually be holding, were for Section 543, Row ZZ, right next to the portable toilets. The kind of seats where you could practically smell the desperation of the fans, and definitely smell the, well, you get the picture. I even made sure the view from these seats was obstructed by a giant speaker, because if you're going to be miserable, you might as well be orally assaulted while you're at it. He thinks he's going to be sipping champagne in the VIP lounge, I mused, admiring my handiwork. Instead, he'll be inhaling the pungent aroma of regret and stale hot dogs. And probably a lot of other things I don't want to think about. It's poetic, really. A symphony of suffering, just for him. The next phase was finding my date. This required a different kind of finesse. I needed someone recognizable. Someone who would make Henry's jaw drop. Someone who screamed, "Upgrade." And who better than a legend from the opposing team? I spent a ridiculous amount of time scrolling through sports news, celebrity gossip, and even old game footage. I needed someone with a public persona that was both charming and slightly rebellious. Someone who wouldn't mind a little bit of theatrical flair. And then, I found him. The Maverick, a retired quarterback, known for his incredible plays and his equally incredible off-field antics. He was a local legend, still beloved by fans, and notorious for showing up in unexpected places. He also happened to be a friend of a friend of a friend, which, in the convoluted world of LA social circles, was practically family. The conversation with my friend's friend was priceless. "So, you want to invite Legend's name to the Super Bowl as your date, to publicly humiliate your cheating husband?" she'd asked, her voice a mixture of shock and unadulterated glee. "Honey, I think I love you." We'd laughed, conspiratorially, like two masterminds plotting a heist. It turns out, the Maverick was surprisingly amenable. He loved a good story, and the idea of being part of a real-life rom-com, especially one involving a cheating husband and a jumbotron, was too good to pass up. Plus, he was a fan of the team playing Henry's team, so it was a win-win. Or, rather, a win-lose for Henry. He thinks I'm just a silly little woman, easily fooled, easily dismissed, I thought, as I finalized the arrangements for our VIP box. He thinks I'm too busy worrying about what to make for dinner to notice he's serving me a plate of betrayal. Oh, Henry, you've consistently underestimated me. It's almost cute, in a tragic Darwin Awards kind of way. The anticipation was delicious, like a perfectly aged wine or a perfectly executed prank. I envisioned Henry and Lily wandering aimlessly in the nosebleed section, trying to make sense of their tickets, while I, Natalie, the invisible wife, the transparent woman, was sipping champagne in a luxury suite, surrounded by people who actually appreciated a good show. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. And I, for one, was ready to carve. The air on Super Bowl Sunday crackled with an almost religious fervor, the kind of energy that makes you believe anything is possible, even a public act of marital immolation. I arrived at the stadium in a sleek black car, feeling like a Bond villainess, but with better hair and a much more justifiable cause. My date, the Maverick, was already waiting in the VIP lounge, looking impossibly cool in a custom jersey that probably cost more than Henry's entire wardrobe. We exchanged a conspiratorial glance, a silent pact of co-conspirators ready to unleash chaos. Meanwhile, somewhere in the bowels of the stadium, Henry and Lily were undoubtedly embarking on their grand adventure. I pictured them, all smiles and starry-eyed nostalgia, strolling confidently towards what they believed were their premium seats. "Section 105, Row 3, Henry would be saying, puffing out his chest. "Best seats in the house, babe. Told you I had connections." Oh, he had connections. All right, connections to a very, very smelly portable toilet. The game started, a cacophony of cheers and boos, but my eyes were glued to the jumbotron, waiting for my cue. The Maverick, ever the showman, was already charming the socks off everyone in our suite. He had a natural charisma that made Henry look like a damp dish rag. "So, Natalie," he said, turning to me with a twinkle in his eye, "ready for your close-up?" And then, it happened. The camera panned over the VIP section, lingering for a moment on our suite. And there I was, Natalie, the invisible wife, the transparent woman, sitting next to a living legend, a man whose face was instantly recognizable to millions. I smiled, a slow, deliberate, utterly triumphant smile, and raised my glass in a mock toast. The maverick, a true professional, leaned in and whispered something in my ear, making me laugh, a genuine, unforced laugh that probably echoed through the stadium. The Jumbotron, that magnificent beast of public display, then cut to a shot of the crowd, zooming in on various fan reactions, and then a stroke of pure, unadulterated genius from the camera crew, or perhaps a very well-placed tip from my friend's friend. The camera found them, Henry and Lily. They were in section 543, row ZZ, right next to the perpetually occupied portable toilet. Henry, looking utterly bewildered, was holding up his ticket, scanning the numbers, his face a mask of confusion. Lily, meanwhile, was fanning herself with a program, her expression a mixture of disgust and growing irritation. The smell, I imagined, was truly something. The camera zoomed in further, capturing Henry's frantic, desperate search for his real seats, his eyes darting around like a cornered rat. He was probably muttering, "This can't be right. These aren't our seats. There must be a mistake." "Oh, there was a mistake, Henry. You made it." The contrast was glorious. On one screen, me, radiant and laughing with a football legend. On the other, Henry, disheveled and increasingly frantic, next to a public restroom, with his increasingly annoyed ex-girlfriend. The crowd around them, oblivious to the marital drama unfolding, probably just thought they were two confused tourists. But I knew, and Henry, I suspected, was about to know. A ripple of murmurs spread through our VIP suite. People were pointing at the Jumbotron, then looking at me, then back at the Jumbotron. The maverick just winked. "Never imagined a signature on a piece of paper would leave so many grown men pale," I whispered to him. And no one was even into art. The game continued, but for Henry, the real game was over. His face, when the camera caught it again, was a picture of dawning horror. He must have seen me. He must have seen the maverick. And he must have put two and two together, realizing that his grand romantic gesture had just backfired spectacularly, turning him into a public spectacle of a different kind. He looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon and realized it was actually a live grenade. Lily, bless her heart, was starting to look less like a romantic interest and more like an exasperated chaperone. She probably thought Henry had just messed up the tickets, not that he was the unwitting star of his own public humiliation. The beauty of it was that she was collateral damage, an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of Henry's own stupidity. The satisfaction was immense. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about taking back the narrative. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the supportive wife, the background character. Today, I was the star. And Henry? He was the punchline. The revelation was not just delightful. It was a triumphant roar that echoed in my soul. The Super Bowl was a game, yes, but today, I had won the championship. And the trophy was Henry's utterly mortified face. The aftermath was, predictably, a glorious mess. Henry called me later that night, his voice a strangled mix of rage, confusion, and something that sounded suspiciously like a whimpering puppy. "Natalie, what the hell was that? My tickets. And who was that guy? What did you do?" I just hummed a little tune into the phone, a jaunty, innocent melody. "Oh, Henry? You mean the Super Bowl? It was quite the game, wasn't it? And the halftime show was something. As for that guy, well, let's just say I finally got a date who knows the difference between a touchdown and a tantrum." He sputtered, threatened, pleaded. It was magnificent. Lily, I heard later, had taken an Uber home halfway through the third quarter, leaving Henry to stew in his own juices, literally and figuratively, next to the portable toilet. The new normal? was less about a clean slate and more about a scorched earth policy. Henry tried to salvage things, of course. He showed up at my door with flowers, then with a pathetic apology, then with a lawyer. I just smiled, a serene, almost beatific smile. "Oh, Henry," I'd say, "you're trying to put out a bonfire with a squirt gun. It's cute, but ultimately futile." The divorce papers were served swiftly, cleanly, and with a level of efficiency that would make a Swiss clockmaker weep with joy. The Super Bowl incident, as it became known, was a rather compelling piece of evidence in my favor. Turns out, public humiliation can be quite persuasive in a court of law, especially when it involves a jumbotron and a football legend. My family, who had previously been so quick to dismiss my concerns, suddenly developed an acute sense of hindsight. "Oh, Natalie, we always knew Henry was a bit off," my sister would say, as if she hadn't spent the last 5 years telling me to just be patient with him. My mother, bless her heart, even offered a half-hearted apology for not seeing it sooner. I just nodded, letting them wallow in their belated wisdom. It was almost endearing, their desperate attempts to rewrite history. Almost. Life after Henry was surprisingly quiet and clean. No more socks on the floor, no more empty cereal bowls, and definitely no more surprise Super Bowl tickets for ex-girlfriends. My apartment felt lighter, brighter, filled with my own choices, my own quirks. I started taking painting classes, something Henry had always scoffed at. I adopted a ridiculously fluffy cat named Maverick in honor of my co-conspirator. He was, coincidentally, just as opinionated and independent as his namesake. I reflected on the consequences, not with bitterness, but with a wry amusement. Henry had lost his wife, his dignity, and probably a good chunk of his self-respect. Lily had lost a potential rekindled romance and gained a lifetime of Super Bowl-related trauma. And I gained my freedom, my voice, and a truly epic story to tell at dinner parties. "You know, I used to think I was invisible," I'd tell new acquaintances, a mischievous glint in my eye. Turns out, I just needed a jumbotron and a football legend to make a statement. There was a certain poetic justice in it all. For so long, I had been the silent observer, the one who absorbed the slights and the indignities. But I had learned that even the quietest person can orchestrate the loudest explosion. I hadn't sought revenge out of malice, but out of a desperate need for recognition, for validation that I was more than just a convenient accessory. And in the end, I got it. And a pretty good laugh, too. The Super Bowl incident became my personal meme, a testament to the fact that even the most painful betrayals can be transformed into a darkly comedic masterpiece. I never victimized myself. I just exposed the absurd, pathetic truth of it all. And in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I had. No, I didn't get a grand apology from Henry. I didn't need one. His public humiliation was apology enough. And as for Lily, well, I hope she enjoys the smell of portable toilets for the rest of her life. In the end, family is who doesn't laugh at your face, only at the joke you've become. And sometimes, that joke is on them.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.